Podcast Talk.
Learn English naturally.
What makes English sound natural?
If you've ever thought, I know English, but I don't sound natural, this episode is for you. Because sounding natural is not about speaking faster or using harder words. It's about something much quieter, and most people never talk about it.
Most learners try to fix their English by adding more, like 顺服, more vocabulary, more rules, more explanations. But natural English usually comes from doing less, not more. And that idea feels uncomfortable at first.
When English sounds natural, it often feels simple, not impressive, not perfect, just right for the moment. And that simplicity is exactly what many learners are afraid of.
People worry that simple English sounds weak. They think it shows a lack of skill, but in real conversation, simplicity usually signals confidence. It shows you know what matters and what can be left unsaid.
Before we go deeper, if you enjoy real conversations about how English actually works, make sure you subscribe to OffScript English. It really helps the channel grow, and it helps us create more episodes like this one.
In this episode, we're not going to give you rules to memorize. We're going to talk about habits, timing, and small choices people make without thinking. Those small things are what slowly change how your English sounds.
When people say English sounds natural, they often imagine a certain accent or rhythm. But natural English is less about how words sound and more about how they fit the moment. It's about choosing language that feels appropriate, not impressive. And that awareness of the moment is something native speakers develop without consciously thinking about it.
You can hear this clearly when people adjust how they speak, depending on who they're with. They don't use the same English with friends, co-workers, or strangers. Natural English changes shape with context. That flexibility is what learners often miss when they focus only on correctness.
Another part of sounding natural is knowing when not to say everything. Native speakers leave things implied. They trust the listener to understand without full explanations. For learners, this can feel risky because silence and omission feel like mistakes.
But that trust is exactly what makes English sound relaxed. When you explain everything, the conversation becomes heavy. When you allow space, it breathes. And that breathing space is something listeners feel immediately.
Timing also plays a huge role. Natural speakers don't rush to fill every pause. They let thoughts land. Sometimes they wait a beat before responding, not because they're unsure, but because they're attentive.
This is why natural English often sounds slower than expected. Not empty, not awkward, just paced. That pacing signals confidence and presence, especially in real conversations.
Word choice matters too, but not in the way learners expect. Natural English prefers familiar words used well. Simple verbs, everyday phrases, and clear structure often sound more natural than advanced vocabulary used out of place.
You can hear this in how native speakers repeat the same words without concern. They don't chase synonyms to sound smart. They repeat what works. That repetition creates clarity and keeps the conversation moving naturally.
Many learners worry that repetition sounds bad, but repetition is normal in real speech. It helps listeners follow your thinking. And when people can follow you easily, your English feels natural, even if it's simple.
Tone is another invisible factor. Natural English matches tone to meaning. Soft topics sound soft. Direct topics sound direct. Learners often focus on words and forget that tone carries half the message.
You can practice this by listening to how people react, not just what they say. Notice when voices soften, slow down, or smile. Those small changes are part of natural speech, and they matter more than perfect pronunciation.
Natural English also includes small repairs. People correct themselves, change direction, or add a detail mid-sentence. Those repairs show real thinking. They make speech feel human rather than scripted.
When learners allow these small imperfections, pressure drops. They stop performing, they start communicating, and that shift is often the moment English begins to sound natural.
So sounding natural isn't a trick or secret formula. It's a collection of small, quiet choices made in real time. And those choices become easier once you stop trying to sound impressive and start trying to be clear.
Another thing that makes English sound natural is how people manage expectations in a conversation. Native speakers often signal uncertainty, hesitation, or openness before giving an answer. They do this to keep the conversation flexible, not rigid. For learners, this can feel strange because school English often teaches you to sound certain even when you're still thinking.
You can hear this in phrases that soften meaning instead of locking it in. People leave room to adjust, change their mind, or react to the other person. This doesn't make the message weaker. It makes it easier for both sides to stay comfortable and engaged.
Natural English also depends on how people react to what they hear. Instead of preparing the next sentence, they respond to tone, mood, and intention. That responsiveness creates flow. And flow is one of the strongest signals that a conversation feels natural.
When learners focus too much on structure, that flow breaks. They wait for the right sentence instead of responding naturally. As a result, English may be correct, but it feels stiff. Natural speech prioritizes connection over structure.
Listening plays a bigger role here than speaking. When you really listen, your response doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to match the moment. That matching is what makes people feel understood, even if your English isn't flawless.
Another natural feature is how people reuse the other person's words. They echo phrases, mirror tone, or repeat key ideas. This isn't copying, it's alignment, and it helps conversations feel smooth and cooperative.
Learners often avoid this because they want to sound original. But originality isn't the goal in conversation. Understanding is, and shared language helps both people stay on the same page without effort.
Natural English also allows for small emotional reactions. A short laugh, a pause, or a change in tone can say more than a full sentence. These reactions show presence. They signal that you're not just speaking, but participating.
When learners give themselves permission to react naturally, anxiety drops. They stop monitoring every word. They start trusting their instincts, and that trust often brings their English much closer to how they actually think.
So, what makes English sound natural is not perfection. It's responsiveness, timing, and connection. When those are present, even simple English sounds right. And when they're missing, even advanced English can feel unnatural.
One of the biggest reasons English doesn't sound natural is that learners try to control every part of the conversation. They plan sentences in advance, worry about how they sound, and constantly monitor themselves while speaking. But natural English appears when that control loosens. When you allow yourself to respond instead of perform, your language starts to follow your thoughts more closely. And that alignment is what people recognize as natural speech.
You can hear this difference clearly when someone speaks without pressure. Their sentences aren't polished, but they move naturally. Ideas connect without effort. And even if the grammar isn't perfect, the message feels clear and easy to follow. That ease is not accidental. It comes from focusing on meaning instead of form.
Natural English also depends on how comfortable you are with imperfection. Native speakers don't stop a conversation to fix every small mistake. They prioritize being understood over being correct. When learners allow themselves the same freedom, their speech becomes smoother and more relaxed almost immediately.
Another key element is rhythm. Natural English has a rhythm that comes from pauses, emphasis, and variation. It's not flat, and it's not rushed. When learners speak too evenly or too fast, the language sounds forced. Allowing rhythm to change naturally makes speech feel alive.
This is why listening is more powerful than speaking practice alone. When you listen to real conversations, you absorb rhythm, timing, and tone. You start to feel what sounds right instead of calculating it. And once that feeling develops, your English begins to sound natural without conscious effort.
Another thing that strongly affects how natural English sounds is how people handle uncertainty. Native speakers don't rush to close every idea. They allow thoughts to stay open for a moment, sometimes even leaving a sentence slightly unfinished. That openness signals confidence because it shows the speaker is comfortable thinking out loud instead of delivering a prepared performance.
Learners often feel the need to sound finished. They want every sentence to land perfectly, but natural English doesn't always land. Sometimes it floats. That floating gives conversations flexibility and allows other people to join in naturally.
You can hear this in group conversations. People interrupt gently, add comments, or finish each other's thoughts. That kind of interaction would feel chaotic in a textbook, but in real life, it feels alive. Natural English adapts to this flow instead of resisting it.
Another detail that strongly affects how natural English sounds is how people react emotionally without using full sentences. Native speakers often respond with small sounds, short reactions, or even silence, instead of complete explanations. These reactions show engagement and understanding. For learners, this can feel risky because school English teaches full answers, but real English values emotional presence more than verbal completeness.
When learners avoid these small reactions, their English can sound distant. Not incorrect, but emotionally flat. Natural English includes agreement sounds, hesitation noises, and small acknowledgments that keep the conversation alive. These elements make listeners feel seen and heard.
Natural English also allows space for misunderstanding. People don't panic when something isn't clear. They ask for clarification calmly, repeat ideas differently, or adjust the conversation naturally. This relaxed response keeps conversations comfortable instead of stressful.
Learners often expect perfect understanding. Because of that, every small confusion feels like failure. But native speakers expect confusion. They see it as part of communication, not a problem to eliminate.
When learners change this expectation, pressure drops immediately. English stops feeling like a test. It becomes a shared process. That shift alone can make speech sound more natural without changing vocabulary or grammar.
Another major factor is how people handle pauses. Natural English doesn't rush to fill silence. Pauses give space for thinking and signal respect. Learners often fear silence, but silence can actually strengthen communication.
Silence often feels uncomfortable only because we don't understand its role. In real conversations, silence is not emptiness, it's space, and space allows ideas to land more clearly and naturally.
Timing also shapes how natural English sounds. Responding too quickly can feel forced. Waiting a moment often sounds thoughtful. Natural speakers trust timing instead of rushing answers.
Natural English is deeply connected to listening. When you truly listen, your responses don't need to be perfect. They only need to match the emotional tone of the conversation. That emotional alignment matters more than advanced language.
This is why natural English often feels easier for native speakers. They're not constructing sentences. They're responding emotionally. Learners can develop this skill by shifting focus from words to meaning.
Many learners believe sounding natural requires confidence first, but often confidence comes after. It grows as you allow yourself to speak imperfectly and stay present in the moment.
Natural English also includes self-correction. People restart sentences, change direction, or adjust wording. These changes show thinking, not weakness. They make speech sound human.
When learners allow themselves to self-correct without panic, speech relaxes. They stop fearing mistakes. They focus on communication, and that focus is what listeners perceive as natural.
Another key element is familiarity. Natural English uses common phrases repeatedly. Native speakers don't search for variety, they search for clarity.
Learners often avoid repetition because they want to sound advanced. But repetition helps listeners follow meaning. It creates rhythm and stability in conversation.
Natural English isn't about impressing, it's about connecting. When connection comes first, language adjusts naturally.
This is why some people with simple English sound natural. They're present, they're responsive, they're connected.
Natural English grows with exposure. The more real conversations you hear, the more natural patterns you absorb. Over time, those patterns become instinctive.
That instinct is what learners often mistake for talent. But it's practice, quiet, consistent exposure to real language.
Once English stops feeling like a performance, it starts sounding natural. You're no longer acting, you're participating.
One important thing learners often miss is that natural English develops quietly, not dramatically. There is usually no moment where everything suddenly sounds perfect. Instead, comfort grows slowly as you spend more time inside real conversations. That gradual familiarity changes how you speak without you even noticing it at first.
That's why comparing yourself to fluent speakers can be misleading. You only hear the result, not the process. Behind natural English, there are years of exposure, repetition, and small adjustments. Understanding that helps learners stay patient instead of frustrated.
Natural English also becomes easier when you stop labeling your speech as good or bad. Instead of judging every sentence, you simply notice how it works. This neutral awareness removes pressure and allows improvement to happen naturally over time.
Another sign of natural English is how relaxed you feel while speaking. When your body is tense, your language follows that tension. As comfort grows, speech becomes smoother and more flexible. This physical relaxation is often the missing piece learners overlook.
Many learners expect natural English to feel confident all the time, but even native speakers feel unsure sometimes. What makes the difference is not the absence of doubt, but the ability to continue despite it. That quiet persistence is what builds natural sound.
Over time, this persistence creates trust. You trust yourself to handle conversations. You trust English to support you instead of blocking you. And that trust changes how your voice sounds to others.
When English starts to feel familiar instead of foreign, something shifts. You stop translating. You stop performing. You simply speak. And that simplicity is often what listeners describe as natural.
If this episode helped you understand natural English better, make sure to subscribe to OffScript English. We focus on real conversations and real language, and we explore how English actually works beyond textbooks.
Thank you for listening with us. Tell us in the comments what helps your English sound more natural, and let us know which topics you'd like us to explore next.